Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that tries to cut through the noise, get past the headlines about modern power structures.
Yeah, give you that sort of ultimate cheat sheet on how how they really work underneath.
And today, we're pushing past the usual stories, the myths about the single big titans of history, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies,
Yeah,
the sort of man on the monument idea.
right. We want to look at something maybe more durable, and maybe more dangerous, which is the corporate blueprint.
The machine, that's the word. The repeatable architecture, the system that actually generates and maintains that kind of unshakable market power we see today.
That's exactly the mission. We're doing a really deep cut here, looking at sources from, well, all over. Early 20th century politics, high finance, the latest algorithms running Wall Street, Silicon Valley.
It's pretty wide net.
It is. Finance, tech, media, even urban planning, politics. We're trying to hunt down those specific recurring patterns of dominance.
The goal being?
The goal is to show you, the listener, that if you put the tactics of, say, a J.P. Morgan from back then next to the playbook of an Elon Musk or a Mark Zuckerberg today, you start seeing the same fundamental building blocks.
The same architecture for creating something that just becomes unstoppable. An unmovable force.
Precisely.
And here's what really grabs you, I think. The hook for you listening is, it's not how much the tech has changed that's startling. It's how little the core strategies for consolidation have actually evolved.
That's a great point.
I mean, the way you crush competitors, how you control information, the political maneuvering, it's structurally kind of the same, isn't it?
It really is. They just have, slicker, newer names now. We talk about dark pools or AI editors instead of railroad rebates and trusts, but the function.
The function is the same. Okay, let's unpack this blueprint, this plan for total dominance. Where do we start? What's the engine?
Right, the engine. Well, the first absolutely essential step in this blueprint is building what we're calling the unstoppable engine of dominance. And that really comes down to two things: achieving incredible scale and having this philosophy of total, almost obsessive market focus. You basically eliminate vulnerability.
Okay, scale and obsessive focus.
Yeah.
And we can see this really clearly if we compare, say, two retail giants, right? Walmart and Amazon. They both had this fanatical focus on customers and their own internal workings.
Exactly. Take Jeff Bezos. His philosophy, it sounds simple, but it's deeply aggressive when you think about it. He said you should wake up worried, terrified every morning.
Terrified.
Terrified. But, and this is the crucial bit, you should worry about your customers, not your competitors. His whole aim was building the everything store. He believed limits were just things you imposed on yourself.
No limits, just focus on the customer and grow indefinitely.
And that long-term, really uncompromising mindset, that's exactly what drove Sam Walton at Walmart too, though his focus was maybe more internal on that distribution efficiency.
Right, Walton famously didn't pay much attention to Wall Street's demands, did he? Those computer-generated 10-year plans from analysts.
Not really. His belief was, look, if Walmart just focuses on long-term growth, demonstrates earnings every day through just being better at execution, the market's trust will follow. Forget the quarterly demands from New York. Execute well, consistently.
And that execution piece, specifically the focus on distribution, seems key here. It's the structural detail. Walmart's success didn't start with some perfect slick logistics system.
Not at all. They started with something actually quite expensive and inefficient. Renting an old garage in Bentonville, breaking down huge shipments, repacking them, sending them out. It sounds chaotic.
It does. But the lesson is?
The lesson is clear. Total control over your logistics, over that distribution pipeline. It's the non-negotiable goal. You might have to suffer inefficiency early on to build that long-term control.
And then that pursuit of scale and efficiency becomes almost fanatical, religious even.
Which brings us straight into the pursuit of micro-efficiency and speed in the modern world. And yeah, fanatical is probably the right word for someone like Elon Musk. His approach at SpaceX, at Tesla.
Relentless push for efficiency, even when it seems, well, almost impossible from an engineering standpoint.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it's not just about, saving a few bucks. It's about pushing past what anyone else is willing to even try.
Like redesigning the Falcon 9 rocket.
Yeah.
He insisted on supercooling the liquid oxygen fuel. What was it? Minus 350 degrees Fahrenheit?
An incredible temperature, minus 350 Fahrenheit. And the engineers pushed back hard.
I bet they did.
They argued, look, this is going to cause massive problems, valves leaking, issues with the extreme temperature changes.
But Musk insisted. Why? For what gain?
To increase fuel density, just slightly. to eke out a tiny bit more performance efficiency. His argument was basically, there's no first principles reason this can't work. It's incredibly hard, I get it, but you just have to muscle through.
That tiny fractional improvement,
Yeah.
it becomes a barrier, doesn't it? A cost and performance wall that competitors just can't easily climb over.
Exactly. That fanatical push translates directly into a kind of monopoly advantage. You create this moat of unique, really hard-to-replicate engineering solutions.
And we see the same kind of hyper-focus on costs with the Optimus robot project, too.
Oh, absolutely. The team presents this cost analysis for the robot's wrist, right? 2 degrees of freedom, like simpler movement, costs $712. 3 degrees, mimicking human movement, is $1,103.
More expensive, but more capable.
Right. Musk insists on the 3 degrees. He wants human-level capability. But then he immediately slams the design as shitty and demands they use cheaper parts.
Cheaper parts. Like what?
Specifically, he suggests using liftgate actuators, you know, the things that lift the trunk on Tesla cars. Mass-produced, much cheaper components.
So the goal is human-level function, but at an industrial, machine-level cost. Optimize every single cent.
Making it impossible for some startup to come along and compete on price. It's about scaling that efficiency ruthlessly. Hashtag B, internalizing infrastructure and control, the private state model.
Okay, so you achieve this fanatical scale, this incredible efficiency. What's the next stage in the blueprint?
The blueprint then moves into a really crucial second stage, internalizing infrastructure and control. This is where the company, or maybe the authority, starts to function almost like its own private state, master of its own destiny.
How does it do that?
Often by finding ways to sidestep public accountability, get around the traditional legal frameworks. And the perfect historical example, maybe surprisingly, is Robert Moses.
Robert Moses, the New York builder. Not exactly a CEO.
No, but what's fascinating is how his power worked. It wasn't from elected office. It was about mastering the political and legal system itself. He was a builder, fundamentally. He looked at parkland, untouched nature, and saw space to be filled.
Filled with his creations, bathhouses, parking lots, stadiums.
Right. He even had this dismissive phrase for natural areas, undeveloped for park use, as if nature was just waiting for his concrete.
But his real masterstroke, you're saying, was legal.
It was legal, yeah. He managed to change the law so that the public authorities he controlled, the Triber Bridge Authority, things like that, could keep and manage their own revenues, the tolls, the leases, all the fees.
Ah, so they generated their own money outside the normal city budget process.
Precisely. And that gave him the power of the purse, which is how traditional civil service commissions usually enforce their rules, right? By controlling the money.
So by controlling the revenue, he bypassed them.
Completely. He could hire the best engineers, planners, lawyers, pay them well, demand absolute loyalty, offer rewards the public salary system couldn't match. He built his own fiefdom.
So he creates this stable internal planning force. Loyal, capable, operating outside the usual slow government channels.
And they draw up these incredibly detailed plans. Blueprints, designs, costings for huge projects, presented as a fait accompli.
A finished solution. Here's the plan, fully worked out, ready to go, solves a public problem.
And elected officials, facing pressure to fix problems, often felt they had no choice but to approve Moses's plan. It was the only game in town. That's a textbook private state model operating above the political messiness.
Wow. And you see a parallel shift happening in finance, too, this strategic transformation of finance, specifically with the House of Morgan.
Yes, a very powerful parallel. The shift for Morgan Stanley from being this, respectable, almost genteel underwriting firm
All right, the source calls it a small, genteel underwriting house.
to becoming this aggressive machine, it required a fundamental change, legally and philosophically. The sources talk about a startling metamorphosis in the 1970s. They became unrecognizably aggressive.
Violating old taboos, doing the first big hostile takeover raid in '74, getting into junk bonds later.
All very risky stuff. And what's crucial is why they had to reorganize legally. In 1975, Morgan Stanley Incorporated. Why? To avoid unlimited liability.
Okay, break that down. Unlimited liability means the partners are personally on the hook if the firm goes bust.
Exactly. Historically, if a partnership failed, the partners could lose their houses, their savings, everything. Incorporation creates a legal shield. It caps the risk to the corporation's assets.
So they built the aggressive machine versus takeover machine with guys like Greenhill and the lawyer Joe Flom doing really risky deals.
Right. Deals that required incredible aggression.
And then they strategically changed the legal structure, incorporating to protect the institution and the partners from the huge financial danger of the very operations they designed.
It's brilliant in a way. Control the risk by internalizing the legal infrastructure. It allows for extreme aggression because the downside is capped. #Tech2, secrecy, data, and the insider advantage, the monopoly's weapon.
Okay, so first part, build the engine scale, control. Second part seems to be about the weapon, how these monopolies maintain their edge. Total control over information and speed, creating this insider advantage.
That's exactly it. It's like the game is rigged before the competitor even sits down at the table.
So how does this play out today, especially in finance? #A. Weaponizing financial information and speed.
Well, you absolutely have to look at the high-frequency trading HFT trap. It's astonishing. By 2008, these HFT firms, they accounted for something like 65% of all trades in public stock markets.
65%? How?
Yeah.
Their advantage isn't smarter analysis, is it?
No, not wisdom or insight. It's pure, raw microspeed. We're talking nanoseconds, millionths of a second.
And the big brokers, the Goldmans, the Merrill Lynches,
Yeah,
they weren't just using the public exchanges, right? They had their own secret systems, these dark pools.
that's right. Can you explain what a dark pool actually is, why the name fits so well?
Sure. Basically, a dark pool is like a private stock market run by the bank itself. It's off exchange.
And dark, because...
Because it operates outside the public view. The prices, the volume of orders waiting to trade, it's all hidden from the public until after a trade happens.
Yeah,
That lack of transparency is everything.
absolutely key.
And the amount of trading happening inside these hidden pools was just staggering.
It really was. Okay, get this. The average dark pool might represent less than 2% of the total stock market volume. Tiny slice.
Okay.
But these same pools executed nearly 50% of their own customers' orders internally, inside the dark pool.
50%. Half their customer flow never even saw the public market.
Exactly. That's a massive rate of internalization. So imagine you're a big investor, like T. Rowe Price in the example. You place a huge order because it's executed internally, hidden. You can't see the real market conditions. You don't know the full demand picture.
You just have to trust your broker.
You have to take it on faith that your broker, who, by the way, is making money from the HFT firms interacting with that same dark pool, acted in your best interest,
Yeah.
despite the obvious conflict of interest.
Wow, so the big banks knew they couldn't actually beat the HFT firms at the pure speed game. This defines the big bank advantage, or maybe the pivot they had to make. Why couldn't they be as fast?
Yeah, it was a pivot. They couldn't be as fast because, well, they were old and big, burdened by history, really. These huge Wall Street banks had bulky, often inefficient systems. The source mentions 60 million lines of old, patched-together code sometimes.
Just structurally too slow. Clunky.
Too slow, too clunky. They couldn't be as nimble as these small, specialized HFT firms.
If they couldn't win on tech, their only edge was their existing customer base.
Precisely. Their special relationship to the prey, as one HFT guy bluntly put it.
The prey. Ouch.
Yeah. He said when traders from big banks interviewed at HFT firms, they eventually admitted, without access to the customer's order flow, the prey, they couldn't make any money themselves. The advantage wasn't being faster. It was using the customer's legitimate need to trade to create opportunities for the actual speed demons, the HFTs.
So the whole market structure shifted. It sold investors this illusion of speed and efficiency.
When actually, moving faster often just meant you arrived in the HFT traps quicker. It wasn't necessarily better execution for the investor.
This just highlights that whole shift toward deregulation, high-risk strategies, which was only amplified by the rise of unregulated players, right? Like hedge funds. Let's talk about insider trading in unregulated funds.
Yeah, by the mid-2000s, hedge funds were absolutely central to Wall Street. And they were known specifically as unregulated investment firms that essentially did whatever they wanted.
Whatever they wanted. And their pay structure encouraged risk, didn't it?
Massively. The standard 2 and 20 model, a 2% fee on all assets managed, regardless of performance, plus an often astronomical 20% of any profits they generated. It created this huge incentive to get returns, basically by any means necessary.
In that kind of environment, it just breeds abuse, doesn't it?
Hmm.
The sources mention SAC Capital, run by Stephen Cohen. There's a story there.
Very telling anecdote, yeah. The rumor, and it was just a rumor, but widely circulated, was that Cohen had gotten a call.
The classic euphemism for illegal inside information.
Exactly. And based on that call, he supposedly flipped his position on a stock called Ellen instantly. Went from being massively long, betting the price would rise, to massively short, betting it would fall.
And allegedly made
Hundreds of millions in a single trade, based supposedly on non-public material information.
And this isn't new. We see this pattern historically too, right? This timeless insider advantage game, like Dennis Levine and Ivan Bodesky back in the 80s.
Oh yeah, a classic case. Levine was an investment banker, Bodesky a famous arbitrager. Levine started just mailing Bodesky confidential documents about upcoming mergers.
Boy, just for money.
Partly, yes,
Yeah.
but partly to push up the stock price through Bodesky's buying, creating buzz, and partly maybe just for the status, the cachet of having access to someone like Bodesky. It later became a formal arrangement. A detailed tipping and compensation scheme shows how that desire for both money and insider status drives this kind of thing. Hashtag B, data dominance, and algorithmic editors.
Okay, so from finance, let's shift to tech. Because the same weapon information control, it just looks different there. It's about hoarding data, controlling what we see. This idea of the Great Wall of data.
And the prime strategic example here is the relationship, or lack thereof, between Facebook and Google. For Google, Facebook represents this massive and fast-growing blind spot.
A blind spot. Why?
Because the fundamental rule is what happens on Facebook's servers stays on Facebook's servers. Google's web crawlers can't get in.
They can't index all that activity, the posts, the likes, the connections.
Exactly. And this isn't just, cat pictures and vacation updates. Facebook's data is incredibly valuable. It shows user intent, social interactions, real-time activity, stuff Google just cannot see through its normal search methods.
And the sheer amount of data locked away is mind-blowing.
Unbelievable. Just status updates alone on Facebook amount to something like 10 times more words than exist on all the blogs across the entire internet worldwide.
10 times.
Yeah.
Just status updates.
That's the scale we're talking about. So Facebook has this proprietary, private view of the world, unindexable by competitors, unsearchable, hidden from regulators. It's a private data monopoly on the social graph. Untouchable.
And it's not just hoarding data, is it? We're also seeing a shift in how information is filtered and delivered. Yeah. The control mechanism is moving from human editors to machines, the AI as editor.
That's a huge shift. We're moving past the model of, say, a BuzzFeed, which relies heavily on a big staff of young human editors making subjective calls about what's interesting, what goes viral.
Right, human curation.
To these new AI-driven internet companies. The prime example given is China's Jinri Tuxiao, which is the core product of ByteDance, the TikTok people.
Okay, Tuxiao, how does it work?
Their editors are entirely algorithms. There are no humans deciding which news stories get pushed to which users. It's all based on predictive modeling of what you individually are likely to click on to spend time reading.
So it bypasses human editorial judgment completely.
Completely. The platform itself, the algorithm, gets monopoly control over the narrative flow, over information distribution. It decides what you see, what becomes popular.
That's fascinating and maybe a bit terrifying. The platform isn't just hosting content anymore. It's actively creating our shared reality by choosing what bubbles to the surface. Hashtag HA3. The power of personal brands and corporate control.
All right, we've looked at the engine of scale and efficiency and the weapon of information control. Now let's talk about the armor. How do these giants protect themselves, shield themselves from political winds, cultural shifts? How do they become these sort of sovereign entities? Hashtag tag A, the political private party.
Well, one way is very direct political influence. Building an operation so sophisticated it actually mirrors a whole political party. Look at the Koch network.
Charles and David Koch, the industrialists. Right. They didn't just fund a few think tanks here and there. They systematically built what the sources call an ideological assembly line. A highly sophisticated political machine designed specifically to protect their vast fortune. It basically functions as its own private political party.
And they were smart about it, weren't they?
Yeah.
Masking the influence, targeting specific groups, makes it more effective than just being one loud voice.
Incredibly strategic. They created this whole coalition, maybe 17 or so allied conservative groups. On the surface, they look independent, like grassroots movements.
But they're centrally funded and coordinated.
Exactly. You have groups like the Libre Initiative, targeting Latino voters with messages tailored to the Koch agenda. Generation Opportunity, aimed at millennials. It allows them to project influence across different demographics.
While hiding the strings.
Right. Hiding the central funding behind these opaque front groups, like the American Future Fund mentioned in the sources, it obscures the unity of command, the sheer depth of the financial backing.
And if we look globally, you see similar kinds of structures, right? Oligarchic control that sort of bypasses traditional government, like the Asian Godfather oligarchies in Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's a really interesting parallel. In Hong Kong, historically, big business secured its influence not just through, standard lobbying. It was structurally baked in.
How so?
They used appointed lobbyists, basically, within the Legislative Council, LegCo, as it's known, and also on Chinese advisory committees. LegCo traditionally had both elected members and these appointed functional constituencies representing specific business and professional interests.
So the big business tycoons always had a direct structural seat at the table.
Always, guaranteed. The result was a system where, as the source puts it, the city was always been managed through the same group of people. It didn't matter if Hong Kong was under British rule or Japanese occupation or Chinese communist oversight.
The same powerful business interests maintained their grip through these structural mechanisms.
Exactly. Those deep ties between the tycoons and the appointed parts of the legislature ensured this consistent, very business-friendly status quo, largely immune to swings in politics. Hashtag B, controlling the narrative and image.
Okay, so you've got the political structure locked down, the finances flowing, but you also need to control the story that's told about you, right? That's where PR comes in, the historical PR playbook.
Absolutely paramount. And John D. Rockefeller Sr., for all his reputation for ruthlessness in business, was actually a pioneer in PR and narrative control. His company, Standard Oil, hired this PR executive named Clark.
And gave him incredible access, apparently.
Unprecedented access to Standard's confidential files. Clark's job was simple. If a newspaper or one of those muckraking journalists attacked the company,
You fight back?
he would hunt up the facts, or at least the company's version of the facts, state them briefly, and then demand that the local Standard Oil agent lean on the newspaper editor to print the company's side.
Using their financial clout, presumably.
Presumably, it was aggressive, real-time narrative shaping using those pressure points.
And Rockefeller tried to shape his personal legacy too, didn't he?
Yeah.
Commissioning biographies.
Two official ones. The second one, written by a university chancellor, was apparently so flattering, such a whitewash, that even Rockefeller's own supporters dismissed it.
So maybe not entirely successful, but the attempt to control the historical record was there, setting a template for reputation management.
Definitely established a template. Now, fast forward to a modern example of total control, not over oil, but over cultural distribution. The Oprah effect.
Oprah's book club. Its power was legendary.
Legendary is the right word. Publishers apparently said being chosen was like waking up in the morning and finding your husband has changed into Kevin Costner. Just this dramatic, life-altering event.
And the demands she placed on them showed that power, didn't they? Strict secrecy.
Strict confidentiality agreements, yeah. Publishers had to provide 500 free copies for her studio audience, donate 10,000 copies to libraries. Authors had to sign affidavits swearing they wouldn't tell anyone except maybe their spouse until the official announcement.
Total control over the reveal, the supply chain.
But maybe the most telling detail, the one that really shows the depth of her power, was the aesthetic control. Publishers had to give her cover approval of the placement of the book club logo.
Wait, she got final say on where her logo went on their book cover.
Think about that. The publisher, who controls every other aspect of their product, had to relinquish final judgment on the cover design to make sure her logo was placed just so. That's absolute control over the market mechanism and the brand identity. Powerful stuff.
That really is. Corporate control through cultural branding.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you have that internal, almost charismatic kind of narrative control, like Steve Jobs and his reality distortion field.
Right. You can't talk about powerful brands without talking about Jobs. He built great products, sure, but maybe equally important was his ability to build great companies with incredibly valuable brands. Apple, Pixar.
And the reality distortion field was his tool for that.
It was his uncanny ability to convince himself, and then everyone around him, to believe in this highly aggressive, often seemingly impossible version of reality. He'd announce crazy shipping dates, for example, like the next T-computer promised in just 18 months.
Which the engineers knew was impossible.
They knew it was unattainable. But he used that feel, that charisma, to basically impose this hyper-aggressive timeline onto reality itself. He'd argue, if we wait, the technology window will close. He forced his teams to push past what they thought were limits.
So it was charisma weaponized to drive innovation. Unsustainable maybe, but ultimately successful in building that unassailable brand.
Exactly, building that moat around the brand through sheer force of will.
Okay, so no blueprint for monopoly power is really complete without talking about the nasty bits. The ruthless tactics needed to eliminate threats, both from labor and from competitors.
Yeah, you need to look at that too. Even someone like Andrew Carnegie, who we remember for his philanthropy later on, was actively involved in crushing labor using quite subtle strategies.
How did he do that? It wasn't just direct confrontation.
Not always. He apparently silently cheered on non-union steel plants, like one called Allegheny Bessemer. It was strategically located just 5 miles from Carnegie's big unionized plant at Homestead.
Okay, why cheer on a competitor?
Carnegie actually wrote that they would reap a good deal if Allegheny succeeds. Why? Because having a successful non-union plant right next door created intense pressure on the union at Homestead.
Made it harder for the union to demand higher wages.
Exactly. How could the amalgamated union lodge at Homestead insist on higher pay when a non-union plant just down the road was operating successfully, paying its skilled workers significantly less? It was a strategic, almost silent use of competitive pressure to undermine labor power.
Clever, in a ruthless way. And then there's the more direct approach, presenting competitors with the choice to sell or be ruined, often disguised as something beneficial, like Purdue Pharma and OxyContin.
That's a really stark, modern example. OxyContin's launch saw astonishing sales growth, doubling year after year.
And the company's line was,
Their initial explanation was that they were simply meeting this huge, unsatisfied market, millions of people living with chronic pain who weren't being adequately treated. They marketed it heavily for long-term pain management.
but the reality that came out later, in court, was very different.
Much darker. Purdue eventually acknowledged in court proceedings that they had marketed and promoted the drug with the intent to defraud or mislead.
How specifically?
Specifically, by claiming it was less addictive, less likely to be abused, and less likely to cause narcotic side effects compared to other opioid pain medications, which turned out not to be true.
So it's a modern monopoly tactic.
Yeah.
Identify a real market need, but then deliberately conceal the risks of your product to grab market share and achieve dominance.
Exactly. Exploit the need, hide the danger. Hashtag tag Gokibrak, the financial and societal reckoning.
Wow. Okay, we've laid out a pretty clear and consistent blueprint here for building and maintaining concentrated power, spanning over a century, different industries. So what are the bigger consequences? The financial and societal reckoning from this persistent hyper-concentration of wealth and power. Hashtag Kema. Questioning extreme wealth concentration.
Well, one huge implication is just in how we even measure inequality, especially the wealth accumulated by these monopoly builders. Researchers like Thomas Piketty have found that the official government reports on income and wealth often give us an artificially rosy picture of inequality.
Artificially rosy. How? How does the picture get skewed? We need to get into that technical detail a bit.
It's largely down to a methodological choice they make. These official reports often deliberately ignore the data beyond the 90th percentile.
So they basically chop off the top 10% of earners, especially the very top, the 1%, the 0.1%.
Exactly. That's where the most extreme concentration happens, but it gets excluded. The justification is often that the data up there is imperfect or it's too hard to collect accurately.
But ignoring the wealthiest slice of the population must massively distort the overall picture, right?
Hugely. Piketty argues that, in practice, this flaw just feeds the wildest fantasies about wealth concentration. Because the official numbers look much less extreme than reality, it actually ends up discrediting the official statistics instead of calming things down.
So to really understand modern consolidated power, you have to look right at that very top tier.
You absolutely must.
Okay, so if we accept that this extreme concentration is happening, and it's partly a result of these structural blueprints we've discussed, the obvious next question is, what do we do about it? How do you address it without just killing innovation? The sources get into the really contentious topic of optimal taxation.
They do. Based on some pretty sophisticated economic modeling, looking at things like how top earners might change their work habits if taxes go up, the elasticity of top incomes. The research suggests the optimal top tax rate in developed countries is, well, it's high, probably above 80%.
80%. On incomes over, what, $500,000 or $1 million a year, that sounds confiscatory,
Yeah.
especially compared to recent history.
It sounds very high, yes.
So what's the rationale? Is the goal just to grab massive amounts of revenue for the government?
No, and that's the really crucial distinction that often gets lost in the debate. The argument presented in the source is that the main purpose of such a high rate isn't actually revenue generation. It's more like social engineering.
How so?
The goal is to drastically reduce remuneration at this level to make those multi-million-dollar CEO salaries much less attractive, but without reducing the productivity of the U.S. economy.
So the idea is to discourage hoarding income at the very top, maybe letting it flow elsewhere, perhaps allowing pay to rise further down.
That seems to be the thinking. Disincentivize the extreme accumulation that comes from monopoly-like power. The assumption is that top executives won't just quit or move away because the U.S. economy is so large, and they point to historical periods like the mid-20th century when top rates were very high, where productivity wasn't necessarily crippled.
It's a bold argument. Definitely challenges current thinking. Hashtag B. The risk of automation and displacement. Okay, and finally, looming over all of this, especially the tech monopolies, is the impact of technology itself. The AI editor we talked about, the micro-efficiency fanaticism, it's all driving towards the risk of automation and displacement.
Yeah, this is the big one looking forward. For a long time, the conventional wisdom was that, Chinese farm workers, factory laborers, they were the ones in the immediate crosshairs of smart automation.
While America's white-collar workers, service economy folks, they had a buffer. College degrees, higher incomes.
Right. That was the thinking. America's economy had a greater buffer, protected by skills that machines couldn't replicate easily.
But the sources are suggesting that view is changing. Fast. Largely because of the massive AI investments by these huge, consolidated tech companies.
It's shifting very rapidly. Kai-Fu Lee's analysis, comparing the U.S. and China in AI, predicts that AI is going to hit white-collar jobs much harder than previously thought. Things like legal services, administration, finance, tasks that require complex cognitive work that algorithms are getting better and better at.
Which forces us, as a society, to think seriously about solutions for potentially widespread job losses.
Absolutely. The proposed solutions tend to fall into three broad categories. You can think of them as the 3 Rs: retrain, reduce, and redistribute.
Okay, let's break those down. Retrain.
Retrain advocates basically believe AI's impact will be gradual. It'll slowly shift the skills that are in demand. So the answer is massive retraining programs, education reform, helping people adapt, keep pace with the machines.
Okay.
Reduce, proponents think the impact might be bigger, but maybe we can absorb it by just working less. Moving to a standard 3 or 4 day work week, spreading the remaining jobs across more people, sharing the work scarcity effectively.
And the third are redistribution.
Redistribute. This camp has the most maybe dire prediction, but it connects right back to this idea of absolute monopoly power we've been discussing.
Yeah, so.
They believe the job displacement from AI will be so thorough, so complete, and the cost of human labor will become so decoupled from corporate productivity, because the AI does the work, that no amount of retraining or fiddling with work hours will be enough.
So the only answer is?
The only answer is a fundamental, deliberate redistribution of income. Things like universal basic income, UBI. Because the monopoly power over labor, now potentially held by AI-powered corporations, will become almost absolute. Society needs a new mechanism to share the wealth generated. #outro.
Wow. This has been a really profound tour, I think, of this modern monopoly blueprint. We've seen how today's giants build power through that fanatical scale by internalizing infrastructure, just like Robert Moses did with his own revenue streams.
And by deploying information warfare, whether that's hiding trades in dark pools or using algorithms as editors to control what we see.
And we saw how they defend that power too, building a private political party, like the Koch network, or achieving total cultural control, like the Oprah effect.
So if these corporate giants are now using AI to potentially displace not just blue-collar, but white-collar jobs too, and if they're operating like these private states or private parties, largely outside traditional public accountability, it really forces the question, doesn't it?
Which is?
What fundamental shifts have to happen in that whole redistribution and taxation debate just to maintain some kind of societal stability? If challenging this concentration requires dramatically restructuring how wealth is taxed and shared,
Mhm.
are we actually prepared for the kind of disruption that might follow?
It definitely makes you think. That idea that critical thinking means questioning those hidden incentives of the powerful, even when the system feels impossibly complex, maybe even rigged.
Like those investors in the HFT scandal, they often admitted they felt something was wrong, felt outraged or terrified, but it took digging, external scrutiny to really expose the architecture of the trap.
So, the final thought for you, the listener. What stands out to you as the most concerning, maybe the most dangerous aspect of this modern corporate machine we've unpacked today? Something to chew on? We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.